Hello, everyone. Thank you for tuning in to today's webcast. My name is Zina M. Pagan, ARF's Marketing Manager, and I will be your moderator for today. Before we begin learning about the next phase of how advertising works, I'll go over some house rules. We are aiming to provide the best webcast experience available. You can help us execute this by keeping yourself muted and your computer web camera turned off. Unfortunately, if you do turn on your cameras or unmute yourselves, I will have to disconnect your access to today's webcast. The audio will be streamed. This means that you will be able to hear us through your computer speakers. However, if you prefer to use a teleconference option, please use the information provided on your screen. Additionally, I will post the information on the chat box throughout the duration of the webcast. Should you have any questions during the session, please send these to me using the same chat box. We are extending the conversation on social media. If you would like to join us, please use hashtag #ARFWebcast. This session will be recorded and the file will be available within 2 weeks from today. If you're interested in hosting a webcast of your own, please contact me at zina@thearf.org. While this is our final webcast of 2016, we already have plans to hit the ground running in 2017. The first webcast for 2017 will be held on January 11th. The topic is Programmatic People and will be presented by Tube Mogul. And announced a few weeks ago, keynotes for our annual conference will feature Wendy Clark, CEO of DDB North America, Raja Rajamanna, Chief Marketing and Communications Officer at MasterCard, and Jen Say, CMO of Levi Strauss & Company. Stay tuned in the next few weeks as we make additional announcements. If you'd like to save $200 off your registration, you can do so by visiting our site now. If you're interested in any one of these events or other ARF programs, you can check out our website for further details or contact me at zina@thearf.org. And without further delay, I present to you today's webcast with our very own Chris Bacon, Executive Vice President of Global Research, Quality, and Innovation. Chris, are you there?
I'm here, Zina. Thanks very much.
Take it away.
Hold on. Pull up my screen. There we go. Hello, everybody. So nice to have you with us today. My name's Chris Bacon. I lead our research quality efforts here at the ARF. In addition, I also head up our training and development programs under the auspices of our ARF Leadership Lab. Really excited to be able to share this with you today. As we know, one of the things that we all deal with is that if the data is bad, then your decisions are going to tumble like a house of cards. And unfortunately, management isn't averse to getting blood on their hands to find out the source of that bad data. And too often that leads back to us in the insights area. I think the thing to consider is this. We talk about Moore's Law in technology. Well, Moore's Law applies to research as well. It goes back to the 1940s when George Gallup and such, when people would go door to door or stop you on the street and ask you questions about what radio shows did you listen to, or what did you eat, or where did you shop. They'd have a clipboard in hand and they would stop you and say, may I ask you a few questions? Well, that same clipboard process migrated in over 40 years to our telephone surveys when someone would, when that telephone would surprisingly ring during dinner time and someone on the other end would say, may I ask you a few questions? It took another 20 years for that telephone survey to migrate onto your PC. And with that, we've all been we've all had those invitations when we've surfed the web to join a panel, to take a survey. And that's been very efficient, and it is made for a broadening of the consumer insights arena. But it's taken just less than 10 years for that PC survey to migrate onto mobile devices and smartphones. And with that transition, the challenge to maintain data quality has never been more at the forefront. And that's one of the things that here at the ARF, we have actually a history of investing in research quality. In 2008, we launched what we affectionately call FOQ, which stands for Foundations of Quality Research. At that time, there were many questions in the industry about the reliability of online research and the replicability of research from one online panel provider to another. So the ARF brought together a number of industry experts to field our own original research to really grapple with the issue of sample quality, survey design, and survey length. But we realized that we had only scratched the surface. So in 2013, we launched FOQ2. And in that work, we dug even deeper into survey design, into sampling issues, into weighting and adjusting, as well as some of the back-end work on routers, which might scare some folks to think about some of the plumbing that goes on behind the scenes, but really quite important to understand to maintain data quality. Throughout both of those projects, we engaged 50 different industry luminaries, and frankly, we interviewed more than 100,000 consumers. And from that work, we've published 9 different best practice articles in the Journal of Advertising Research. And for all ARF members, all of those articles are available to you on our the ARF.org website in the Journal of Advertising Research section. But one of the things that we saw, and it was really kind of a happenstance, not planned for in 2013, but we actually wound up with about 3,500 people responding to that FOQ2 survey on a smartphone. And one of the things we saw is that for those people who were using their smartphone to complete the survey, they had a 50% higher drop-off rate on mobile devices than those who were taking the survey on PCs. So that was a warning sign. The other warning sign we saw was that people on mobile devices required 40% more time to complete the survey than those who were taking it on PCs. They slogged through it, but it took them quite a bit of time. And so one has to wonder about the quality of responses when you're getting to that tail end of a survey. So we started seeing these issues in 2013. Excuse me. And unfortunately, the problems aren't going away. We've seen that there has been a 700% increase in mobile survey responses in just the 3 years since we did FOQ2. And that trend is going to continue. So the work that I'm going to share with you today is comprised of a review of 40 different white papers, journal articles, custom research that's contributed by our sponsors, all of which we've captured in 4 basic best practice principles to recharge the battery on your mobile research. 4 things I want you to consider here. Number 1, keep in mind that growth generations are mobile. It's important to get mobile right if you're going to understand where the buyers of tomorrow are headed. Number 2, 10 or less. We'll talk here about how long that survey should be. 10 minutes is your magic number. Number 3, design surveys that are thumb friendly. I don't know about you, but I often hit the wrong button on my smartphone and have to switch back and forth between portrait and landscape. Our respondents are not that patient, so you've got to design a survey to be thumb friendly. And then finally, our opportunity as we go forward. How do we progress? How do we progress from that clipboard survey of the 1940s into truly a dialogue that is facilitated by handheld devices? So let me go into a little bit more detail on each of these 4. Let me start out with growth generations. And the fact is this: as we've seen from some of the sponsors who contributed to this best practice work, 49% of the respondents on mobile devices were millennial consumers. 34% of those respondents were multicultural. Now, those are significant increases in response rates from millennial and multicultural consumers in just the 3 years since we did FOQ2. Why is this important? I think we all know where the demographics are headed in this country. And where does our growth come from? Our business growth comes from millennial consumers and from a burgeoning multicultural population. It's so important that we get mobile research survey quality right to make sure that we're listening to those buyers of the future to make sure we're delivering on the products and services they want. That's why we invest in mobile research quality. Number 2, let me talk about length of survey. So when we did FOQ1 9 years ago, one of the questions we wondered was, how long should the survey be? How long will people stay with you and not start satisficing their responses? They won't start straightlining or Christmas treeing or whatever it is to get through to that end of the survey and be entered for that $500 raffle. And what we learned is that in a PC world, 20 minutes was the max. If you kept your surveys to 20 minutes or less, you were pretty good to go. There was a window. You could go slightly over, but you risked the quality of your data if you pushed it out to 30 minutes. And if you went beyond 30 minutes, well, that was just too much. People were going to drop off at significantly higher rates. You were going to have to offer significantly higher incentives in order to encourage someone to complete your survey. And I will admit, in my life before the ARF, when I led insights at a winery in California, I subjected consumers to 60-minute-long PC-based segmentation and path-to-purchase surveys. I'm at fault. I did it myself, and I know how bad it was. But that was then. Where are we now? In a mobile world, what we've seen from the information that's available, you got to cut that survey length in half. Keep your mobile surveys to 10 minutes or less. Why is that? Well, think about your own, think about how you use your smartphone yourself. Think about how often you're checking it in while you're at the grocery store, or dare I say, waiting in traffic. For those of you who we know we shouldn't do it, but we do check that phone. We're distracted. There are a lot of things going on. And so a respondent who is on a mobile device taking a survey isn't paying as much attention. There was a quote from one of the sample providers. They asked their panelists why were they taking surveys, and PC-based panelists would say, well, I have my survey taking time in the evening. Mobile survey respondents don't have that. They're checking their surveys when and where they can. So it's on the go. If you go over 10 minutes again, you can push it, but you're running risks. And going over 20 minutes, well, that's really pushing your luck. You've gone at the 20-minute mark, you've really gone too far. So you'd say, how am I going to do this? I've got so much that I'm trying to cram into my surveys. How am I ever going to get them down to 10 minutes? Well, that's our challenge. We really have to design mobile surveys to be thumb friendly. And I think we can all recognize that rather elegant grid that we're also familiar with that we use in our PC-based surveys. Yes, they're efficient. They capture a lot of information all at once. but it's just too clumsy. It's too difficult for somebody on a mobile device to try to answer that kind of a survey question. So how do we evolve that grid to something that looks like this? Break out the questions individually and lay out the scales and anchor the scales from 0 to 10 so that it's much easier for someone to thumb their way down a survey. Or try this. Change the way you write the survey. Change the way you ask the questions. Make it very simple, very, very straightforward, and make the boxes very easy for people to click on. Or, excuse me, you can go so far as to do this. Completely rewrite how you ask the question, make it very simple, make it a yes or no. It all comes back to what's the objective? What is it you're trying to learn, and what actions do you need to take? And how can I rewrite, rephrase, reframe the questions that I'm asking to make it more enjoyable for someone to answer? Yet, yes, I'm not averse to getting feedback on myself. So, how do we make it thumb friendly? We've got to make sure surveys load quickly, that they're clear and legible, and that the questions themselves are engaging. So you might say, wait a minute, I need more specifics. So let me walk you through a list.
Hello, everyone. Please bear with us. I'm going to try to reconnect with Chris. Hello, everyone. We're still working on this. Thank you for bearing with us.
You've turned my audio off.
Okay, now I hear you. Okay. Okay.
Where do we go?
I hear you, so you can continue.
Where did we get cut off?
Go back to slide. Go back 2 slides. This is the last thing I saw.
All right, I'm starting there.
All right. Thank you.
Okay, folks, we're going to pick up. Sorry about the technical problems. 4 things that we can all do to recharge the battery on our mobile research. 1, keep in mind that growth generations are mobile. That's where our business growth is going to come from. Number 2, keep surveys to 10 minutes or less. I know it's going to be a challenge, but the consumer on a mobile device is distracted, and 10 minutes is about as long as they'll stay with us. So how do we get to a 10-minute survey? It's got to be designed to be thumb-friendly. And finally, how do we evolve? How do we evolve from that clipboard survey of the 1940s to a handheld dialogue facilitated by mobile devices of today? So let's start with growth generations. Why is that important? Well, one of the things we saw from one of our contributing sponsors is that 49% of their mobile respondents were millennial, and 34% of their mobile respondents were multicultural. Those are significant increases from the learning we had in 2013 from our FOQ2 work. Why is that important? That's where our growth is going to come from. Simple demographics. So it's critical to make sure we get this right and know how to design a survey for mobile devices that are going to capture the needs and wants of our growth generations. Number 2, how long should the survey be? Well, when we were doing the FOQ1 work 9 years ago, we said, you know what? In a PC, you could, in an online world, 20 minutes was about the max you wanted to make that survey. Beyond that, you ran a risk. You ran the risk that people would start straight lining, that they would satisfy their responses. You risked the quality of your data. go over 30 minutes, and that was way too much. And I know that in my pre-ARF days, I was at fault. When I led insights at a winery in California, I subjected consumers to 60-minute segmentation surveys and path to purchase surveys. It was rough, and we had to offer people significantly higher incentives. They did it, but it was painful. In a mobile world, we need to cut that in half. We really need to keep our mobile surveys to 10 minutes or less. And again, it's because that consumer is distracted. They're in the grocery store. They're picking up the kids, or they're at the kids' soccer meet. There's so much else going on in their life that to pay attention, to dedicate that time to responding to your survey is just not feasible for them. They're going to fit in your mobile survey into the rest of their life. So 10 minutes is about as good as you can go. You can go over that, but again, it risks the quality of your data. Go up to 20 minutes, too much. You might be asking yourself, how am I ever going to take my surveys that I'm trying to do so much and cram it all into 10 minutes? You got to design it to be thumb friendly. And honestly, we all are familiar with these grids. They're effective. They collect a lot of information at once, but they just are not elegant in a mobile device. They're just too small to read, and they're too small to respond to. So how do you change from a grid to something like this? Easy to read, easy to respond to. Or change the question itself. Change the format. Do one question per screen. Or even rewrite the question altogether. Think about what it is, what your objectives are, what you need to learn in order to make those business decisions. And then reframe your question, restate your question, rewrite your question to fit your business needs and fit the mobile device. The key is this: design surveys that will load quickly, that are clear and legible, and that are engaging to consumers. A little more detail, 8 simple things. I hope they're simple. Number 1, when you're designing, start with mobile first and then size it up to a PC or tablet. You've only got 4, maybe 5-inch screen to work with. It's a lot smaller than a 24-inch all-in-one screen that many of our PC-based consumers might have. So if you design with mobile first and then size it up, it'll be a lot easier than starting from the PC and sizing down. Write simple, short questions. Again, rewrite your question to what you want to learn, and the consumer will stay with you to the end. Redesign your response options. Omit the grid. Get rid of spinners, drop-down boxes. Vertical scroll. Don't force someone to go horizontal, and don't expect them that they're going to flip their phone around and it's automatically going to go from portrait to landscape. We can't be in control of these things. So it's a lot easier, and consumers are accustomed to scrolling vertically than they are going horizontally. Make the buttons and the text boxes bigger. I know I've got fat thumbs, but I'll respond. I'll type in a text box if I can see what I'm typing. So make the text box big enough for someone to see what it is that they're inputting. And minimize the scrolling, pinching, zooming. Yes, people might be familiar with that when they're trying to search for something on Google Maps, but they don't want to do it on your survey. The less you ask your respondent to do in order to read your questions, the more likely they are to respond. And keep the multimedia to a minimum, avoiding Java and Flash if at all possible. They just don't work well across all devices. But using responsive web design to adapt the interface to the device is a good best practice to keep in mind from our digital marketing friends. So using those digital advertising and display tools and adapting them into surveys will help keep consumers engaged in your survey, whether it's on a mobile device or PC. And finally, my advice to you, everybody, test, test, test. Test it on your PC. Test it on a tablet. Test it on multiple smartphones, Android, iOS-based, Windows-based. They're all going to look different. You want to make sure that no matter the device the consumer has, they're going to see what you intended them to see in your survey. Because our opportunity is this. Again, we've been doing clipboard surveys for more than 70 years. How do we take advantage of the technology and the way consumers communicate on mobile devices to really have a dialogue and not just collect data? How do we use typing, talking, and video, on-the-go surveys, in the moment, and even passive measurement? So one of the things that we're be heading up at the ARF in 2017 is our next phase of learning to optimize mobile research. And that is, how do we speak the consumer's unique language on mobile devices to redesign mobile surveys to make them more effective? Again, the number of consumers starting surveys on smartphones just continues to climb. And yes, while it's still lower than desktop surveys, that rate will just continue to increase over the coming years. And the key thing is this. As we said earlier, one of the things we learned in FOQ was that mobile respondents were more likely to drop off or take longer. That's still the case today. There's still a gap in the completion rate of somebody taking a survey on a smartphone versus those who are taking them on a desktop. So how do we take advantage of the unique language that consumers speak on mobile devices that they don't necessarily use on their PCs or desktops? Well, one of the things we think might help is to use emojis. So emojis, while they are prevalent across much of the digital landscape, they are predominant in mobile devices. So what we're going to be experimenting with in 2017 at the ARF is, how can we redesign a standard text-based survey to take advantage of emojis as a way to increase that completion rate on smartphones, have the same quality of data that one would have on a desktop, and hopefully actually make the survey more enjoyable, engaging to consumers. So with that, I'll remind all of us 4 things we can do to recharge the battery on our mobile research. 1, keep in mind, it's important we get it right because growth generations are mobile. If you want to understand your millennial consumer, multicultural consumer, that growth of the future, it's important to make sure you design mobile surveys right to understand what they think. Keep those surveys to 10 minutes or less, please. And you can do so by designing them to be thumb-friendly. And finally, how we evolve from a standard, the 75-year-old clipboard survey, to a handheld device that leverages the consumer language on mobile is our opportunity. And that's something we'll be taking advantage of and experimenting with at the ARF in 2017. So with that, I want to thank everybody. We apologize for the technical challenges, and invite, if there are any questions, Zena, if there are any questions in the chat box, if you would share those.
Yes. So as Chris just mentioned, if you do have any questions to submit, please include those in the chat box. To start, Chris, the first question is 10 minutes the absolute maximum for mobile surveys? What happens if I have an 11-minute survey?
10 minutes, look, the survey police aren't going to come looking for you if you ask somebody to do an 11-minute mobile survey. As we said, respondents on mobile devices are distracted. They've got a lot going on. and asking them to stay with you to answer your questions for 15, 20, 30 minutes is more than they're willing to do. Target 10 minutes. And actually, if you design the survey to be more engaging, more enjoyable, that speaks in a language that they're accustomed to on mobile devices, consumers will stay with you longer than 10 minutes. They'll stay with you 11, 12, and they might even stay with you 15 minutes. It has as much to do with designing a survey with the respondent in mind first, as opposed to how many questions can I fit on this device.
Okay, next question. If I replace all my grids with single questions, won't that make the survey longer?
Yeah, it will. It will, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's going to make it worse. Again, if the survey is designed in a way that is legible, that is easy to respond to, that makes sense to the consumer. Don't use a lot of jargon. Don't force them to scrunch, to pinch or scroll or zoom in order to be able to find out which one of those little radio buttons is the one that they want to be pressing on. Yes, it will make it longer, but it also gives you the opportunity to focus. I know that all too often we have a bad habit of just saying, "Oh, I'll just throw in one more question." Well, I just want to ask this, or let me just add, the CMO wants me to ask that. They just want to squeeze in one more. And yes, we all know that we do have to sometimes squeeze in those CMO questions, but the more that we take this opportunity to reevaluate and rethink what we're asking, why we're asking, and what we're doing with the data that we've collected, I would venture that you can probably cut a number of those questions out of those grids so that when you convert it into one question per screen, it's actually not that much longer than what you started with. It's tough. It's not easy, and it's not fun, and not. There's always going to be somebody arguing for no, just keep my question. It's tough love, but sometimes we got to do it to keep the consumer in mind at first.
Next question. Do people switch between devices to complete surveys? Is that bad?
Good point. Good question. Yes, they do. Yes, they will switch between. Again, if they have the option, and not every survey tool allows people the option to switch from one device to another. But for those that do, we find, I think the numbers were between about a third of respondents. It may be higher. Forgive me if I don't recall the exact number. Oftentimes they will start on a mobile device. They'll open up the survey invitation, and they will open up the survey on their mobile device and then close it and then come back to it and complete it on a PC later. It's not bad. Again, if you've designed your survey starting with mobile in mind, it will look the same from when they left off on their mobile device to when they pick up again, either on their mobile device later on or on a PC with a larger screen. So, no, it's not a risk, and I'm venture to say that the behavior will continue and probably increase over time as more and more people start surveys on mobile devices. So again, if you keep those design principles in mind, start with the mobile first and then size up to the PC, you'll be okay.
Okay, and here is our last question if you don't get any more in. How is use of emojis scalable from a benchmarking and norms standpoint? And how is bias and interpretation of meaning controlled for?
Someone's been reading our RFP. Those are exactly the questions that we intend to answer when the experiments that we're doing in 2017. So the way we're looking at it is this. We'll be taking a standard surveys that have reliable normative benchmarks. They are standard government-based behavioral research science, and I'm forgetting the full acronym, but they are well documented in surveys that we actually used in our FOQ work a few years back. So we will have some internal information that we can carry forward. And the experiment will be designed so that there will be half of the sample will be responding using emojis, half will be responding using a traditional text-based survey. And at the same time, it'll be mixed between smartphone as well as PC-based. So it's a 2x2 quadrant. And the intent is by having that breadth of response across device, text, and emoji, we'll be able to look for changes in completion rates, drop-off rates, as well as responses. Additionally, we also intend to ask open-ended questions showing people a set of different emojis and asking them to write in what does that emoji mean to them, what emotion does it represent, or what does it communicate? Because we do recognize that they are subject to different interpretation, and we know that we're going to need to manage and correct for that to make emojis a reliable source for survey design. So that is all part of our 2017 experiment, which we intend to share results at our annual conference in March. So we hope you can join us then.
Okay, that's all I've got for questions. Chris, do you have any final thoughts that you'd like to share?
No final thoughts, just a thanks to everyone for sticking with us today. We really do appreciate it.
Thank you so much. Chris, thank you so much for presenting the mobile quality checklist to our webcast crowd. And as Chris just mentioned, thank you to everyone who was able to join us and stick with us through our technical difficulties. Have a happy holiday, and I hope to hear from all of you for our next webcast in January. Have a great day. Thank you.